Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale Darkness video, and also the 1-year anniversary video. I'd just like to say before this video starts, thank you so much for all the support over this year, and of course for sticking around and continuing to watch these videos. So to commemorate a good first year, we now have the legendary Pokemon that this game is known for, Lugia, or as I would normally say it, Loogiah, because it's just kind of funny to say that. Anyway, Lugia is a legendary, so this should be really easy. Our Lugia in particular has a calm nature, raising its special defense but lowering its attack, which is honestly fine because it's going to be more of a special attacker anyway. It gets the ability Pressure, which doubles all PP usage by the opponents, which could come in handy for a few fights. And according to Bulbapedia, it gets the move Whirlwind by level 10. Which doesn't deal any damage, but luckily the tutor lady should be able to patch up any issues it has early on. So with that, let's go ahead and go over its stats. Lugia has 106 HP, 90 attack, 130 defense, 90 special attack, 154 special defense, and 110 speed, and gets access to a wide variety of moves, which is nice. Now, it doesn't actually get an attacking move till level 22, but luckily that's what the tutor is used for. So what does it get from the tutor? It gets Mimic and Thunder Wave, which should be good enough for at least the beginning of the game. So I go ahead and teach those, and I go into the battle against the first trainer and lose. And that's because Mimic only gives you 5 PP of a move, so I decide to backtrack and just not teach Thunder Wave or Mimic, that way I can get Struggle. Now, even though Struggle is a typeless move, it is technically still a physical move, meaning that moves like Growl still reduce its damage. And unfortunately in this fight, despite my best efforts, I am eventually taken down once again. So I decide to teach just Mimic, not Thunder Wave, and I go into this battle against the Sailor who gives the Attractium, because he is the perfect trainer to use, because you can Mimic Pound from the Whismur, and use that to take down the Whismur and nearly take down the Marill. Now Marill does have Defense Curl, but luckily that's only raising its defense, not lowering my attack, which is technically better, so I'm able to use up all of my Mimics and then use up all of my Whirlwinds in order to eventually start attacking with Struggle, and then I'm able to take down my first trainer. Okay, well that's easy enough, I'll just keep fighting him, and you can only fight him one time. So as long as I play it safe, I should be able to fight this trainer and use up all my Mimic PP, and then eventually I'm able to use Struggle. I do learn Safeguard at level 11, which I then have to stall the PP out on it as well, which is kind of risky. But after I do that, I decide to do this fight again, of course saving before I do it, and I use Struggle throughout the entire thing to try to take down all of his Pokemon. And because Lugia itself is really defensive, both physically and specially, this fight really isn't that big of an issue. It's just before I had way too many power points to actually do it, but now with Struggle I should be able to get through this pretty easily. Another thing to note about Struggle is that I'm not actually able to pick a target, so I am kind of glad that I was able to take down Numble before it stacked up too many Growls, so that I was doing very little damage. But eventually I beat my first trainer, and using that momentum going forward, I do a ton of training, get up to level 17, and decide to fight the old man here. And I am definitely well over leveled for this. However, the thing is that once I leave this area, I'm not really able to come back and continue fighting many trainers. There's still a couple you can fight, but none of the ones on the way to the Relic Stone. So I feel fairly confident that I can make it to level 22 before the next battle I need. And then I realized that I can't actually use Mount Battle to train, because as soon as I enter, it's going to restore all of my power points, and as soon as I leave, I'm going to have all of my power points. So unfortunately, I've locked myself into a battle against the Green Power Ranger, which usually isn't that hard of a fight, and I don't even think it's all that hard of a fight in this instance either. But because the Struggle attacks randomly, it means that there's a lot of times where I will attack a Pokemon that I don't want to, which leaves me open to being hit by a move like Poison Sting, which has a small chance to poison me, which happened multiple times. In fact, this is now the 6th attempt against the Green Trainer, which is mostly just down to bad luck getting hit by critical hits or being poisoned. But anyway, Before this battle ends, I'd just like to start a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. And of course, I can't say it enough, thank you so much for all the support on these videos. I wouldn't have gotten this far without all of you, so thank you. Anyway, when I was thinking about doing Lugia, I really thought this was going to be a real quick video to round out the end of the year, you know, have a few longer moments in it, but overall just be kind of a shorter video. Instead, this has been a 2 hour and 37 minute grind just to get Gust. But as soon as I have it, everything starts picking up. I decided to do Mount Battle Area 2 just to go ahead and pick up the Water Pulse TM and teach it right away, because I want to use it throughout the Cypher base. Then we go into the battle against Lavernia. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly. I go for Gust into the Beautifly immediately, which takes it down. Then out comes Roselia. Love Disc hits me with Water Gun, doing almost nothing. Another Gust takes down Roselia. And then out comes her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Delcatty. Now, I doubt this will go down in a single hit, but I decide to swap over to Water Pulse. That way I can get a chance for confusion like I just got there. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit itself. Hits me with a Shadow Rush, doing almost no damage as well. Hopefully it hits itself in confusion. It doesn't. So I finish it off with a Gust, and then all that's left is the Love Disc, which can only really survive maybe 2 Gusts. So that takes it down below half, and one more Gust finishes it off for a pretty easy Laverna. And of course, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video, the 1 year anniversary video, without the obligatory Mirror B. Take it away, Mirror B. Always good to see you. Anyway, at the Recam Tower, I pick up my 2 favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect. And of course, I teach Hidden Power right away, which happens to be Hidden Power Poison. Okay, well, not that great of a Hidden Power type, but it's something for now, I guess. At level 33, Lugia gets the move Recover, which I'm going to teach right away over Mimic. And then I decide to pick up this Spinub, because it's holding the Never Melt Ice item that raises Ice type damage by 10%. And then I go teach Ice Beam over Hidden Power. I then go into the battle against Snaddle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Lantern. I go for Ice Beam immediately into Quagsire, which isn't quite a one-shot. Shockwave is doing a surprising amount of damage, but Rock Tomb doesn't really do much at all. Another Ice Beam does finish off Quagsire. Then out comes Lunatone, his first Shadow Pokemon, which always sets up Shadow Sky on the first turn, so I do want to take it down as quick as possible. Unfortunately, Water Pulse doesn't take it down, and Shockwave takes me down to about half health, and Fruity Pebbles take me down even further. Go for Water Pulse to finish off the Lunatone before it attacks. And then out comes Castform. Now Castform really isn't a threat to me, so I decide this turn to go for Recover, because I am getting quite low on health. And Weather Ball, not really doing too much. Shockwave takes me down a little further. So their combined efforts probably do about a third of my health, so I decide to go for another Recover, just to guarantee that I won't be taken down by a crit. Fruity Pebbles rain down again. And I go for Ice Beam into the Castform, taking it down in a single hit, and then out comes Metang, his final Pokemon. And it should just go down to a couple Water Pulses, which it hits, and... okay, well, it's not quite a couple, it'll need a third one, or a Lucky Confusion, maybe? Go for another Water Pulse, and it does get confused. Okay, doesn't hit itself, I'm down to 31 HP, go for another Recover, and I'm really hoping Metang just takes itself down. It doesn't quite do it, so I have to finish the job, and then all that's left is the Lantern, which really can't take me down on its own. Go for an Ice Beam, because it's the strongest move I have to use against it, because it resists all of my moves. And with one more Ice Beam, I'm able to beat Snaddle on the first attempt, so not too bad. Anyway, before going into the next fight, I decide to teach Psychic over Gust, and then I go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and on the first turn, the Nuzleaf always goes for Fake Out. And even though I was going to go for Recover at first, I realized that I need to take down the Electrode because it is just going to be going for Spark, and I really don't need to be paralyzed on this fight. I go for Recover now that I'm up against 2 Pokemon that really can't damage me, and luckily, Vileplume actually misses its Sleep Powder. Then I take it down with a Psychic, then out comes Whiscash. I go for another Psychic, which doesn't quite finish off Whiscash, so it is able to hit me with a Hyper Beam, but it really doesn't do that much damage. Recover, another feint attack from Nuzleaf, and go for Water Pulse to finish off the Whiscash. Then out comes his final Pokemon, which is Skarmory, and because I don't think I can one-shot it, I decide to take down the Nuzleaf first, and then it uses Hyper Beam, which means that it won't attack this turn, and it survives on a thread, but Water Pulse does finish it off, and Gunzap goes down on the first attempt. At the top of the pyramid, I teach Earthquake over Water Pulse and go into the battle against Gorgon. Now because I'm a flying type, he's not going to use the Earthquake Protect strategy, so I can just use Earthquake to my heart's content. Celio hits an Aurora Beam, lowering my attack, which is a bit unfortunate. So I'm not really doing that much damage anymore with Earthquake, so I decide to swap over to Psychic to take down the Ursaring, which it doesn't quite one-shot. Another Water Pulse. I go for Earthquake, which finishes off Ursaring and does quite a bit of damage to Slowking. And then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, which is Primeape. Another Water Pulse. Luckily, I don't get confused. Go for Psychic to take down the Primeape. Then out comes his final Pokemon, a Shadow Hypno. Another Water Pulse. This one actually does confuse me, unfortunately. And I hit myself in confusion once. Shadow Storm hits me with a crit, doing quite a bit of damage. And then I go for Recover to heal up, just in case I get terrible confusion luck. But I think even with it, it's not really all that threatening. I hit myself again. Shadow Storm hits again, not really doing that much damage without the critical hit. And then I go for Psychic, which finishes off the Slowking, and then all that's left is the Hypno. And now that Earthquake's damage isn't being spread between two opponents, it will be doing quite a bit more damage. But it still looks to be a 3-shot against the Hypno. Go for Ice Beam, which would have been better. It looks to do about half. So one more Ice Beam finishes it off, and we beat Gorgon pretty easily. Moving on to the last area of the game, and it's not looking great for Lugia, but it should still be able to finish in a decent spot. I go into the rematch against Lavernish, leads with a Gorbis and a Gardevoir. I go for Psychic into the Gorbis immediately to take it down, and then out comes Roselia. And because it's part poison type, I know Earthquake should be able to take it down. Gardevoir actually survives on just a little bit of health. Out comes Farfetch'd, and I do need to take down the Farfetch'd because I really don't want to be hit by Shadow Panic. So I take it down immediately, and then out comes her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Altaria. Gardevoir is hitting me with Ice Punches, and because I don't want to be frozen, I decide to take it down. Then all that's left is that Shadow Altaria, which does almost no damage with Shadow Break, and goes down to a single Ice Beam. At the top of the mountain, I run into Snaddle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Matang. I go for Psychic, which takes down Quagsire in a single hit. Then out comes Scizor. Matang hits an Ice Punch, doing almost no damage. Because I heal it right back up, go for Earthquake, which takes down Matang and does half to Scizor. Out comes Solrock. Now the only thing I don't want to see here is Silverwind, and luckily it's going for Steel Wing instead. Ice Beam doesn't quite take down the Solrock, so it does set up Shadow Sky. So now Fruity Pebbles are raining down. I go for another Ice Beam to finish it off. And then out comes Castform. Steel Wing again. Luckily no defense raise. And then I go for Earthquake again to take down the Scizor and start doing damage to the Castform. And then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Starmie. It hits me with a Thunderbolt. Not really doing too much damage. I go for Earthquake again, finishing off the Castform and doing a decent amount of damage to the Starmie. Hits me with the Shadow Storm, doing actually quite decent amount of damage, but not enough. And I take it down with one more Earthquake. Moving on to Ardos, he leads with a Shadow Swallow and an Alakazam. And because the Shadow Swallow uses either Shadow Sky or Shadow Half on the first turn, it's really not that much of a threat because I can always heal off the damage. Luckily it goes for Shadow Sky, which is definitely the better of the two. Go for Psychic to nearly take down the Kingdra. Hits me with a Shadow Break. Ice Beam doesn't do that much damage. Fruity Pebbles rain down, and Kingdra's just about to go down, so I decide to take down the Swallow, which then brings out Heracross. Kingdra hits me with another Ice Beam. Fruity Pebbles finish off the Kingdra, and then out comes the Shadow Electabuzz, which is always a threat, but in this case, because I have such a high special defense stat, I don't think it's really that bad, so I decide to take down Heracross, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Snorlax, and hopefully Electabuzz starts using Shadow Mist instead, but I go for Recover anyway, just in case it does just go for Shadow Storm, like it sometimes does. Shadow and misses. I go for Psychic to take down the Electabuzz, but it survives with just a bit of health, hits me with another Shadow Storm. Shadow Wind hits, doing actually way less damage than I thought it would. Go for another Recover, another Shadow Storm, and another Shadow Wind. It misses. Go for Earthquake to finish off the Electabuzz and do quite a bit of damage to Snorlax. Hits me with another Shadow Wind, no crit, and so I'm able to finish it off with one last Earthquake. Okay, well, Ardos was pretty easy. Moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Slowking and an Ursaring. Go for Psychic on the first turn to take down Ursaring. Out comes Aggron. Slowking hits me with an Ice Beam. Go for Earthquake to nearly take down the Slowking, but take down the Aggron. Then out comes Walrein. Another Ice Beam, no freeze. Go for Earthquake, finish off the Slowking, and start dealing damage to the Walrein, but it looks like it's going to be a 3-shot. And then out comes his Shadow Poliwrath, which really isn't a threat on the first turn because it only sets up Shadow Sky, so I go for Psychic to finish off the Walrein. And then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Mr. Mime. Poliwrath sets up the Shadow Sky, and I go for Psychic to take it down because it is a fighting type. And then all that's left is the Mr. Mime, who hits me with a pretty decent Shadow Storm, but as long as it doesn't get a crit, I should be able to take it down. I use Earthquake, not quite enough, and with one last Earthquake, I'm able to finish it off. So Gorgon was pretty easy. Moving on to Eldis, he leads with a Manectric and a Ninjask. Now the Ninjask isn't really that much of a threat, so I decide to take down the Manectric with an Earthquake. And then out comes Salamence, which should just go down to a single Ice Beam. Silver Wind hits, not really doing that much damage, and Lugia's ability, Pressure, is actually really useful here because Ninjas can only use Silver Wind 3 times because it only has 5 PP, and I eat up 2 at a time. I'm able to take down the Salamence in a single hit, then out comes the Flygon, which also goes down in a single hit, then out comes Marowak. Now Marowak is always a big threat, but in this case, because I outspeed and take it down in a single hit with Ice Beam, it really isn't. And then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lapras. I go for Psychic into it, which nearly takes it down to half. Okay, well it's going to be a 3-shot. It sets up Shadow Sky. And I go for another Psychic, which it survives on just a sliver of health. Shadow Storm really isn't doing that much damage though. Go for one last Psychic to finish it off, and then all that's left is the Ninjask, which unfortunately is going to stall out a turn just by using Protect. But eventually I will be able to hit it with Ice Beam and finish off this battle against Eldis, which was honestly easier than I expected. So with that, we move on to the big box legendary, Shadow Lugia against my Lugia, to see who is the greater Lugia. And as you can see, Ice Beam doesn't quite take it down in 2 hits, but its Shadow Storms are doing very little damage. And so I'm able to take it down fairly easily. Goodbye, Shadow Lugia. And we go into the battle against Gravel. He leads with a Rhydon and a Moltres. I go for Psychic into the Moltres immediately, which doesn't quite one-shot it. Hits me with a Shadow Fire. And a Shadow Wind doesn't take me down either. I go for Psychic to finish off the Moltres. Then out comes Executor. Shadow Wind misses. I go for Recover. And luckily, I don't get hit by either of these Shadow Winds, which is incredible. Go for Earthquake to finish off Rhydon and do quite a bit of damage to Executor. Out comes Tauros, and because I know that Tauros really isn't that much of a threat, I decide to take down the Executor. Then out comes Articuno, which could be a bit of a threat, especially if it gets a freeze on me. I go for Psychic into it, doing half health. And Shadow Chill doesn't do that much damage, it doesn't freeze. Go for another Psychic. Unfortunately, it does survive on just a little bit of health, so I did get a bad range. Ice Beam again, which doesn't freeze. And then one more Psychic does finish it off, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is Zapdos. And luckily, I do have Ice Beam to do super effective damage against it. But just to play it safe, I decide to go for a Recover here. Shadow Bolt, not really doing too much damage. Shadow Rush does take me down to half though. And because I know this turn that the Tauros has to set up Shadow Sky again, I go for Ice Beam, which gets a crit, taking Zapdos down in a single hit. And I go for Psychic, which nearly finishes off Tauros. Shadow Rush hits, doing almost nothing. Fruity Pebbles rain down, and Psychic finishes off Tauros. So with that, how well did Lugia do? Well, it beat the game at a time of 11 hours, 25 minutes, and 48 seconds at level 66, with 8 losses throughout the entire game. 0 of those being to bosses, and all 8 of those being at the very beginning of the game, when I just couldn't attack things. So Lugia is incredible. It's only got one fatal flaw, and that's that it doesn't get a solid attacking move until level 22, which ended up taking 2.5 hours to even get started on the run. And if it had gotten Gust at the beginning, there's a chance that it could have been the best Pokemon by a large margin, because the difference in time between when it got Gust and when it finished the game was only 3 hours and 6 minutes, which would have been 6 minutes faster than our current number 1, Jirachi. Now, of course, this is a bit of speculation because it doesn't start out with Gust, and it gets Gust at level 22, meaning that it's already pretty over-leveled for the area in the game that it gets it, because of all the grinding I had to do in the early game. But I think it still would have had a phenomenal time had it just had an attacking move right at the beginning. Really just anything better than Struggle. But with that, it still does find itself right smack dab in the middle of the tier list in the B+ tier, which is pretty funny, and a great way to wrap up the first year. So, as always, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and here's to another year. Anyway, bye!